Koi are some of the most beautiful fish that you can own. Okay, debate me if you want, but I still think that they're some of the most beautiful fish. Not every koi is fortunate enough to get placed. Sometimes if they have a deformity, they get left behind. Or I've even seen it where homeowners move, they leave their pond for the new owners, don't care about the fish at all. Here's the question. Would you go out of your way to build a pond just to rescue some of these fish? I'm Micah Miller. This is our channel, Easton Outdoors, and today we are going to build a rescue pond. So I've never done a collaboration before, but Greg Wedstock, the pond guy, reached out to me and asked if I would work with John from KG Tropicals. The idea of a collaboration with John had been in the works for a while, but Aquascape hasn't had a chance to break away from their home market. They've been so busy and they have so many other projects scheduled that they asked if I would take the reins on building a pond for John. After talking to John on the phone for well over an hour about not just ponds and not just YouTube, we got along pretty well. And I knew it was time that I needed to head down to John's house and check out where a pond could go. One of the first things that John showed me when I arrived there was these 5 feeder fish that he had rescued. When he moved from Northern Virginia down to North Carolina, he brought these 5 feeder fish with him. They've been living in this lonely tank for quite some time. Because he could not stand to have these fish fed to an Oscar or some other fish of prey, he saved them from a fish store and now has them at his house waiting for their new castle. It's time to build these fish a mansion. Where are these rescue fish gonna come from? And how are we going to fit this into our timeline? Before we answer those 2 questions, we actually need to figure out where the pond is gonna go. Those questions are irrelevant if we don't know where the pond is gonna be placed. John has an absolutely beautiful property, and when we drove down there and we arrived, it has this stately feel. It has some old magnolias, some beautiful pines, and if you haven't seen John's YouTube video, you should go check it out. He does a much better job explaining the locations of where the pond could and couldn't have gone. One of the things we discussed while we were looking at his property was where he's going to live life, because he was excited about having the pond near where he records his videos all the time, which is the fish house. But that kind of bothered me, because if the pond is by the fish house most of the time, he is not close to the pond, which is purely for enjoyment, in my opinion. After some discussion and after a very light debate, I say it's very light because John did not push back at all when I pointed out the fact that he would want to enjoy this pond even in the evenings and not have to walk an 1/8 of a mile to where his fish house is. I want to see John drinking coffee in the morning, drinking a cocktail in the evening while he's editing his videos, looking out of his bay window, enjoying the pond in all of its beauty and living the aquascape lifestyle. Location established, it was time to work out the schedule. Something like this is hard for us to schedule because it's so far from our home base. There's a lot of logistics that go into building a pond, from getting the rock, which is about 12,000 pounds of rock to site, plus the gravel, which is about 4,000 pounds worth of gravel, then all the pond equipment, which is about 2 pallets worth of pond equipment, plus the machines, plus the shovels, plus the guys. I mean, I could go on and on. I don't know if you guys want me to bore you with that. We looked at the schedule, and there's really only a 2-day window in the next 3 months where James, my brother, could come down and actually build this pond for John. If we missed that 2-day window, there could be a few weeks before Jim could actually come back to finish the pond, and I did not want that to happen. I wanted John to have the satisfaction of seeing this pond finish inside of 2 days. When it comes to the logistics of moving all of these materials to the site, as any contractor can vouch, moving 12,000 pounds of boulders, 4,000 pounds of gravel is a pretty big deal. And check the comments. I'm sure somebody will vouch for me on how painful this can actually be. So Ryan Crandall, a local material mover that works with us frequently, came to our yard. We loaded all the boulders in the back of his dump truck, and he arrived about 30 to 45 minutes after James arrived on site with all of the other materials. I was really proud of James. Inside of the first hour and a half, not only did he have the entire pond dug out to the right level with all the shelves carved out exactly how I would have done it myself. Yeah, he is my brother, but anyway, he did all that, and he had liner in the pond inside of the first hour and a half. I mean, you guys have to take your hat off for this guy. They didn't take lunch, they didn't stop, they didn't take a break until they got to that first stopping point, which when he was headed out the door that morning, he told me, he's like, we're not going to take lunch until we have this milestone accomplished. And he did it. I really like John, but I lied to him intentionally. I didn't want to hurt his feelings if I couldn't deliver, but I thought if I could show up with a stacked slate sphere and install it right in the waterfall, he would be surprised. So I didn't say anything to him about this stacked slate sphere. Say that 5 times fast. I didn't tell him anything about this until we actually showed up and he saw my brother taking it outside of the box and laying it out with all the rest of the equipment. Man, was he surprised. He never brought up the fact that I lied to him, but he did still like that sphere. So I won't lie to you guys like I did to John, even though it was a white lie and I didn't get in trouble for it. I really don't want to get in trouble with you guys. I don't think that the Aquascape equipment looks good by itself. Thankfully, Aquascape doesn't think so either, and they designed it in a way that it can be hidden by rocks, that the liner can be hidden by rocks, that we can put the gravel over top of the liner and hide the bottom of the pond. The entire system that Aquascape has designed is specifically put together so that all of the equipment, the pump, the skimmer, the biofalls, the liner, the plumbing, everything is tucked away and put underneath all of these natural boulders, and it just looks like something you would see in nature. The difficult thing about rocks is every single batch we get is different. So it's hard for us to know exactly how everything is going to come out. Sure, I can say I'm going to build a 10 by 14 and it's going to look roughly like these 10 pictures I'll show you, or I'm going to build an 8-foot stream on the side of that 10 by 14 pond, and here's roughly what it's going to look like. To say that the rocks speak to us might be a little Mother Earth or a little hippie, but they kind of do. You have to look at these rocks, you have to lay them out, you have to pick through them. And you'll notice that Jim multiple times picks up a rock, tries to put it in a place, and it doesn't work, so he takes it out. So you might think we're just moving the excavator back and forth, or we're not actually doing much, but frequently this is us trying to place rocks in a certain situation and seeing if it'll play out and seeing if that rock likes to be in that position. Once a rock is placed in a way that it just works, it literally just works. It's almost like a puzzle. Everything just comes together right as you would want it to, and it just meshes super well. It's a hard thing to explain, but when you're out there playing with these rocks, it does make sense and it does all come together. One of the final things that we have to do to make sure that this pond is naturalized and looks like it belongs in the location that we placed it. Oh, and by the way, we are about finished on time. If you notice, this is starting to get a little bit dark outside. The sun is starting to set, but this is still day 2, and we did make the schedule like we had planned. It was a long day, and the guys did not get back to our shop until well after 11 o'clock that night, but they did make it happen. So what you'll notice right now is we are starting to work around the edge. We're starting to cut back the liner. We're starting to cut back the underlayment, which is what's protecting our liner. And we're going to go around the pond very systematically and make sure that all of these edges are tucked. It's really important, especially up by the waterfall, to get all this tucked in properly, because if we don't, what ends up happening is a low edge forms. And that's where I would say that's about 90% of the leaks that we experience are right on those pond edges where we didn't tuck them right on the waterfall. So you can see Donnie and Christian, they're really spending their time around the top of the waterfall to make sure all those edges are right so that John doesn't have an issue in the future. Completed in 2 days for our good friend, John. At this point, you're probably like, wait, Micah, you told me this was a rescue pond. Where are these rescue fish? It was kind of ironic. Right after I met with John and he told me he wanted to have fish rescued and brought down to this pond, I said, no problem. We get calls all the time. At least once a week, we get a call from somebody that says, hey, I have fish. We're moving. We don't know where to put them. We have too many. Where are these fish going to go? There's always somebody reaching out to us. In the 2 months leading up to the build, we didn't get a single call of somebody asking us to rescue fish. It was insane. Like, I really don't know how to explain it. It almost always happens that there's once a week, my office manager is like, hey, can we take any fish? For almost 2 months, we had no calls. Then the text came. I was really excited to see this text because I knew John would be excited. And the pond that these fish were in was grotesque. And I don't mean that lightly. This pond was pea green soup that you couldn't even see maybe a half an inch down into the water. You could only see the fish when they came up to get fed. But there's only one catch. We have to get in the pond and get these fish. Tune in next week where we're going swimming to catch some fish. Well, John's going swimming and he doesn't know it yet. I didn't know how waterproof these things are.
Well, that would have been nice to know before I got in.